like to welcome everybody to the latest installment of Greenhouse Growers Executive Series. This is a continuing conversation about business practices in the green industry that can foster success both for your individual operations and for the industry as a whole. I'm your co-host and editor of Greenhouse Grower, Brian Sparks, and I'm joined by my fellow host, Greenhouse Growers Senior Editor, Julie Hewlett.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're excited to offer the Greenhouse Grower Executive Series. These conversations will take place every other month to feature various aspects of your business. Each installment is intended to be a thought-provoking, action-oriented conversation at the executive level to discuss your top business needs. If you have ideas for future webinar topics, please send me an email and I'll drop my email address in the chat. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them in the Q&A box that you see on your Zoom screen. We will address all questions in the last 10 minutes of the webinar. The webinar will be recorded and available on greenhousegrower.com. And if you're having any trouble hearing the webinar, please log out of Zoom and then log back in.
Thanks, Julie. And in this installment, we'll be discussing all things regulatory. We'll talk about why navigating the complex regulatory process that's involved in running a horticulture business requires lots of expert guidance on issues ranging from labor and workforce development through tax issues and more. We'll also be discussing how to navigate certification programs. Joining us today are Matt Mika, who's the the Vice President of Advocacy and Government Affairs with AmericanHort, Craig Regelbrugge, Executive Vice President of AmericanHort, and Tom Demaline, CEO of Willoway Nurseries in Ohio. And at this point, I will turn things over to Julie.
Well, I think we're starting with a presentation from AmericanHort.
First off, I want to welcome everybody today. My name is Matt Mika, Vice President, Advocacy and Government Relations for AmericanHort. Appreciate everyone being here today. Going to walk through some of the issues we've been seeing. We had a fly-in, the summit recently in September. Tom Demaline, one of our members, was there. And then also what we see kind of coming forward here in the next couple of months and then Congress. And then Craig will come through with some regulatory issues in plant and pest stuff. So we will get into that. First off, I want y'all to meet our team here. Many of you might have known or met Ken Fisher, our president and CEO. Craig is here today. Myself, we're part of the advocacy team. And then also on our research and HRI team, we have Jennifer Gray and Dr. Michael Martin, who we do a lot of work with. Quick update. We recently had a fly-in. We had about 120 attendees, had over 160 meetings on the House and Senate side, folks from 25 states and also a province in Canada. Also had a plant pack dinner where we had roughly 55 attendees, where we had Congressman Jimmy Panetta out of California at our dinner. And then we, throughout our event, had the former governor, Larry Hogan, who came in and talked about being a Republican governor in a very Democrat state there in Maryland. We had 4 members of Congress, Spanberger from Virginia, Jim Costa from California, John Duarte from California, and also Dan Newhouse from Washington all came in and talked about what's going on they see in Congress, what's going on in the committees, and where they see issues moving forward. We talked about a lot of things related to the Farm Bill, appropriations, tax, transportation, everything related to USDA, EPA, also related to how important research is. And then finally, everyone's favorite issue of labor immigration, specifically H-2A and H-2B. With that, Tom, you were a part of that group. Do you want to mention what all you did there and kind of your background there with Willoway?
Sure. Yeah. It's I think it's my 10th or 12th fly-in that I've attended. We started back in '98, every other year going, but it's really informative to go there, hear firsthand what's going on with, from the association, but more importantly, the members of Congress and what direction the wind's blowing. One of my takeaways from this year's event was really the people that Matt had brought in, the members of Congress, to speak with us. Whether a D or an R, they've had a good message, and they really are working for the American people and trying to do the best thing they can. And we get the feeling that Congress is polarized on the far right and the far left, but there's 400 and some people there that are really trying to do the right thing. It's just that 10% of both ends that are muddying the waters at the time. But it's good to build those relationships and continue to foster continued relationships so they understand our needs.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate that. Craig, anything you want to add to that before we move on?
I just, this is probably self-apparent to the execs who are with us today, the business owners and top managers, but relationships really are the coin of the realm in what we do. And that's certainly true in the legislative space, but it even is true from the perspective of navigating regulatory issues. And I'll get into that a little bit more on the plant health side in a few moments. But the relationships that are built and sustained by us as your professional representatives, but also by you, are really the basis from which we move to resolve problems as they emerge that are affecting our horticultural industry and our entire supply chain.
Thanks, Craig. On that, one of the reasons to really go and visit Washington, D.C. or your state capital, or your local, if it's a township, city, or county, or anybody else who's a local government, is one, just got to educate them. I will tell you, I've been doing this over 20 years. Craig's been doing it a little longer. We won't say how long, but the chance is to educate your elected officials from the state, federal, and local level. Just some numbers here for you all to see. I mean, you really have a new class of freshmen, sophomores, and juniors here in the House and Senate. Just this class of Congress, you had 81 new members in Congress. 7 of those were senators. Only 3 of them had served in the House before. Of those 74 in the House, 40 Republican, 34 Democrat. If you look, there's 12 members of that class in the House that have never served at the state or local level, and 18 of those 74 are 30 years and younger. As you can see, it's a very new and younger Congress. The average age is about 50-51 in Congress. And then we'll get into the Farm Bill here in a second. If you look at the House Ag Committee, there's 54 members. Each individual member has their own staffer that handles the Ag Committee, and only 7 of those staffers have done a Farm Bill before. I think the number is about 231 members of the House of 435 have not voted on a Farm Bill. So that means they are new in the last 5 years. So it really becomes important, which is why it's so important that we, AmericanHort, have our fly-in, our summit, to go in and educate folks, talk about issues that are important. But more importantly, for folks that came out like Tom, is to tell the story, them to get to know you, what's going on, what works, what doesn't work, tell them about the business. Majority of our members of Congress, senators, and even at the state and local level have not grown up in agriculture. They do not understand horticulture. They do not understand the green industry, so you have to educate them. On that, Tom, you've set up a close relationship with your member of Congress, Max Miller, there. You want to talk about that and him visiting and just getting to know him and his staff?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, Craig talked about relations, and Matt's been talking about relationships, and you can be good and bad of new people coming into Congress, and I think you need to take that as an opportunity with Max Miller. He's actually in the district. We have a store in that district, and I don't live in that district, but we have economic impact there. But Max grew up in Shaker Heights, which is a eastern suburb of Cleveland, and currently lives in Rocky River. And he admittedly has never set his foot on a farm, and doesn't understand the Farm Bill that well. But in his defense, he's really reached out and wants to learn, and taking the opportunity to come to the nursery, understand what we're doing, and we can explain why we're important to the industry, what we can do, what we can bring, our environmental impact, our economic impact. These are all opportunities, and it's just a matter of, this is simply making a phone call after I seen he was on the Ag Committee and say, I'm a resource for you. Would you have any opportunity to come out and meet? And he called back and said, I'd love to have you on my advisory board for the Farm Bill. Would you be willing to do that? So we got a seat at the table, direct line with his staff person, Karen Williams, who's been through 3 Farm Bills. She understands the deal, and it's been a great relationship to be able to communicate our message to the people in Washington so he can carry the water for us.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate that. Yeah, I worked with Karen for years. She's great. Work with Max. He's really come through. But through your relationship, we've been able to work AmericanHort and others in the ag industry and greenhouse industry and horticulture to educate Max and his team. So we appreciate the congressman visiting your facility. On that, I cannot explain how important it is to get your elected officials, state, federal, and local, to visit your facility. It's probably the most important thing, especially with you got a farm bill coming up that was supposed to be reauthorized. We'll get to that here in a second. And anything related to your business and your industry, if it's supply chain, if it's hiring, if it's tax, having them come out and visit your facility. So we would all say, get out there, invite those elected officials, state, federal, and local, get them onto your facility, show them what's going on. And Tom made a good point. They may be your member of Congress where they represent you at home or where you have a facility. And for folks that are in different states or have different congressional districts, get to know those folks, reach out to them. More importantly, get to know their staff. As a former staffer, I can tell you we are the folks that get to educate the member and tell them what's going on and put the vote rec in front of them. So as you're doing that, get to meet the staff, get their email, get their work phone, get their cell phone, reach out to them. It really helps to set up the system as we're moving forward to help educate and advocate on behalf of the industry.
Matt, if I could just add to that real quick, we set up a meeting with about 25-30 of our management team to meet with Max when he came out. Some of them actually lived in his district, and that's a huge opportunity for them to explain their story. And I had several comments from staff after that. He's a really nice guy. He's interesting. He wants to do the right thing. So it allows them to, it's not all about. It's a two-way conversation, and having that audience there for them.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate that. So AmericanHort's 2023 Farm Bill priorities. Probably should have jumped in this before. I joined AmericanHort in late June, and one of the first things I got to do was go to Cultivate in July, and that was just amazing to see that happen in that whole week and set up and seeing everyone and all that goes to put into Cultivate and just the whole industry as a whole. But as I mentioned, this is my fifth Farm Bill. I had worked in the industry before, worked for Tyson Foods for 12 years, and then worked for the American Meat Institute, which would represent all of the groups, Tyson Foods and others related to it, and then worked on the Hill for 3 members of Congress from Michigan. And then prior to that, spent about 5 years in the state legislature working for Lieutenant Governor and 2 state reps. So being my fifth Farm Bill and working with Craig, he was one of the first people that lobbied me when I came to DC in 2004, working for Dave Camp on ag jobs. We this year have been focusing on, and Craig can jump in here a little bit because this is prior to my joining on, but really important to the industry and horticulture and you all is making sure the horticulture title, research, rural development, crop insurance all work and are vital to the industry, and that allows you all to get into it and make sure they're working correctly, and also making sure USDA and how they implement these programs are working. The Farm Bill, as you might know, helps out growers, retailers, suppliers, researchers, basically the whole supply chain from the farm to the individuals that are buying everything related to if it's plants or gardening and you all that you're selling. So it's a long supply chain, and the Farm Bill helps set that up. Now, the Farm Bill is a 5-year authorization. It does not deal with the money. That's appropriations. That's a whole nother conversation we can get into, but this is the statutory language that would set up how these programs all work out. One of those pivotal programs, and I know Craig will get into this, is the Plant Protection Act, Section 7721. We've asked for a little increase. This is very helpful with emerging invasive species. It's an important, we've spoken with House and Senate Ag Committee. This is a priority for them. It'll be in there. The question is actually what the funding level will eventually be related to appropriations. Lastly, Specialty Crops Research Initiative, asked for a little bit of increase there. And then also want to establish $100 million over 5 years for a mechanism bill. Actually, that was a bill we worked with Max Miller, who Tom got to meet with, a very bipartisan bill. Abigail Spanberger from Virginia helped us put that together. But Farm Bill takes a long time. We have not seen a House or Senate version yet, as all of you might have read or seen. All 4 of the corners, as you call them. So that would be the House chairman, who is G.T. Thompson from Pennsylvania, Republican, Democrat, ranking member David Scott from Georgia, the chair of the Senate Ag Committee, Debbie Stabenow, Democrat from Michigan, and then the ranking member, John Bozeman, Republican from Arkansas. Have all asked for a 1-year extension while they continue to work on it. We heard from GT when we were out there and recently met with him that once he gets floor time from the Speaker of the House, the new Speaker, Mike Johnson, he will then go back 2 weeks to 3 weeks from that date to actually put a bill up on the committee floor in the House Ag Committee. Craig, you want to add anything to that before we move on?
I'll just say that some of these programs, we as an industry are not an industry that necessarily has paid a lot of attention to farm bills back in the 1930s and 40s and 50s and 60s. But really, for about the last 15 or so years, maybe almost even 20 years, the Farm Bill has become a vehicle for making major investments in what I would call sort of the critical infrastructure that helps to support the success of greenhouse and nursery growers in our supply chain. And so these particular programs, the Plant Protection Act and Specialty Crop Research Initiative, really are the go-to places where we go to find and leverage dollars to resolve emerging pest and disease issues or other challenges affecting the industry. And so that's really our ticket to play in this game is these kinds of programs which are investing in our future success. Just to kind of stress that point.
Only one thing I'll add, and Tom, you can jump in there. I know you're on Representative Max Miller's Farm Bill Committee and just his ag advocacy group. We recently met with Max, and he came out as someone who's a little more on the conservative side, and you might hear some folks like from the Republican side to say, hey, we don't need a farm bill. It's not something that's important. But from folks from agriculture, we know how important it is. We have to maintain this. And he came out and said, we need to have a farm bill, need to make sure it works. I want to work on one. But Tom, you want to talk about that process and working with him and his staff and the farm bill priorities that the congressmen have?
Yeah, so we've met 3 times in person and with a group of farmers from his district, and everybody's got a different need. We've got these research initiatives, but there's also the farm insurance. There's rural infrastructure, which is huge, broadband and stuff like that. There's a lot of things in this bill that's important to farmers and nursery people. The IR4 component of this is the research for specialty use chemicals for our industry. If we didn't have that, we'd really have trouble having labels on chemicals for us to stay effective and growing stuff. So there's a lot of small things buried in here, but it's all beneficial for the agricultural industry.
Yeah, Tom, that's a great point. There's a lot of things that go into it. There's 12 titles. The average farm bill is anywhere from 800 to 1,500 pages, which is why it takes so long, which is why we haven't seen one. And just to let people know, the actual farm bill ran out, the 2018 farm bill, on September 30th of this year. But the funding for that, as we mentioned earlier, is part of appropriations, and that's all funded to the end of this year. So the funding levels are okay. I think I have 1 or 2 more slides here, and then we'll turn it over to Craig. And I know Craig will get into IR4, so I appreciate, Tom, you mentioning that. One thing we're all kind of hearing about is another potential government shutdown. There is actually voting today and tomorrow in the House and Senate if they can move it, what's called a CR, continuing resolution. The current government funding is to the end of Friday, so at midnight. Why is this important to the industry? Why should you all care? The biggest thing is the federal government will not be able to work. Staffers with the federal government, if it's USDA, EPA, Department of Transportation, Homeland Security, OSHA, and others, have to be made essential. If they're not, they have to go home. They're not allowed to look at email. They're not allowed to get involved unless they're equated to being essential. 2 of those programs that I know a lot of folks are looking at is H2A and H2B, and that has to do with the processing. If those applications have not gone through, then that whole process could stop and they'd have to start it over. One of the things with the government shutdown, and Brian might be aware of this, I know Craig and I are, is anytime there's a potential government shutdown, USDA, EPA, or any federal government has to start 2 to 3 weeks out putting together their program, who's essential and who's not. So they've already started this. And so what happens is the White House, Department of OMB, Office of Management and Budget, will put those out. They'll have shutdown plans, and those are all available through congress.gov or the White House OMB, or you can go to these departments and see what they have. But today being Tuesday, we still have 4 more days. Congress, as we like to say, is hurry up and wait. So not saying we will not have a government shutdown, but just wanted you all to be aware of that. And with that, I think that's my last slide. So Craig, on to you, sir.
Yeah, so I'm going to say a few words. We promised to talk a little bit today about regulatory compliance, and the reality is at the business level, you could do a deep dive on one of any number of regulatory compliance areas and spend a half a day in that deep dive. We could be talking about tax compliance. We could be talking about employment law compliance, hiring practices, all these different things, and do really deep dives and probably be with you for the next 2 weeks. Obviously, that's not practical. Where we are going to dive in a little bit deeper, though, today is in some of the emerging opportunities that that exist in the plant health and plant certification space. Next slide. So where I want to start is just to kind of level set with folks. What are we even talking about here? If you are a greenhouse or nursery grower in pretty much every state in the country, you have a fundamental responsibility for becoming licensed or registered or whatever the terminology is in your state, usually by your state Department of Agriculture. And that certification enables you to access the domestic interstate marketplace. So if you are licensed or whatever the term is in your state, there is a reciprocity arrangement that applies around the country so that you are able to ship to other states without having to also be licensed as a nursery grower in those places. So typically the bulk of the work is done by the state departments of agriculture. For licensed growers, they are typically coming onto your place of business, your farm, at least once a year, and they're looking around for signs of plant pests. They're looking around for signs that you are effectively managing plant pests. And that's sort of the basic ticket to play. For a lot of folks, depending on what you're growing and where you want to ship it, you may have additional requirements, often for specific pests that are regulated pests, regulated as quarantine pests, either at the federal level or the state level. Sometimes, depending on what the pest is, you're granted the authority to do certain things and sort of self-issue or self-certify and go ahead and ship. But sometimes you actually need an inspector coming on your premises and putting eyeballs on your plants to make sure that they are acceptably free from whatever the regulated pest is. I guess the thing I would offer on this is, in our industry, given the diversity of crops we're growing and the diversity of ways we're growing them, there are always new and emerging issues. There's some new exotic, foreign plant pest that's gotten introduced that poses a threat someplace in agriculture, and our industry may be a victim, or we may be seen as a vector that can move that pest around. And so we have to scramble to figure out, okay, what do we need to do to deal with this new threat and to be able to continue to ship to our markets? Next slide, please. And so I would just say, times, they really are changing. The pace of business is getting faster and faster. We have fewer traditional pesticide treatments or certainly really no silver bullets anymore, where you can apply a single treatment that takes care of everything. The day of silver bullets is long gone. And meanwhile, from a grower perspective, the stakes are getting higher and higher and higher in terms of struggling with risk management. And an extreme example that unfolded maybe 15 or so years ago on the nursery side of the business, if you happen to be a tree grower and you had ash trees in your inventory, and suddenly emerald ash borer, a pest native to Far East Asia, is detected in the area in which you're growing, all of a sudden you can't sell your crop. And so, on the greenhouse side, working in controlled environment, maybe it seems like the threats are a little bit less, but I would remind people that about 20 years ago, when we had an incursion of the bacterial pathogen Ralstonia on geranium or pelargonium plants, cuttings produced offshore, there were tremendous losses in the industry. And in fact, there were greenhouse operations that simply went out of business because the losses they faced from that were so great. So, and with more and more growers moving a lot of plant material through mass retail, if something goes wrong and plants end up needing to be stop saled or destroyed, on the Wednesday before Mother's Day weekend, it's on you. The mass retailer isn't going to take the loss. And so the stakes are getting higher and higher. And all this has led to this and other factors are kind of driven folks to think about, is there a better approach than the way that we have been doing things? And we're seeing in plant certification and in certification of other types of agricultural commodities, really globally, we're seeing the emergence of and reliance on what are being called systems approaches, where you go through a very deliberate process of identifying the hazards, what can go wrong, the control points, where can it go wrong, or where can you do something to prevent it going wrong, and the kinds of mitigations, we often call them best practices, that can be applied accordingly. There are some of these programs are overarching. Some of them are very specific to a particular pest, like I already mentioned, Ralstonia. In the case of Ralstonia, if you're an offshore cuttings producer, you must participate in the Ralstonia certification program, which again is based on a systems approach, in order to be able to access the U.S. market. More recently, we saw a voluntary program set up that many of you are probably benefiting from, whether you knew it or not, where offshore cutting producers of many other types of plants, if they are participating in the offshore greenhouse certification program, 95% of their shipments bypass USDA inspection. In essence, they're in a way sort of pre-cleared. And that means the supply chain works faster. The delays that happen when USDA is inspecting plants at the ports are largely avoided. And you get cuttings that are in, better quality to root effectively and to produce a better crop. A third example of a systems approach program like this is the U.S.-Canada Greenhouse Grown Plant Certification Program, which if you're a participating greenhouse in that program, following the systems approach and maintaining the records and whatnot that you need to, you can ship across the international border without having to call up your inspector and request and pay for a phytosanitary certificate. You get special stickers that you can ship under, and you get to bypass sort of the whole program of the typical inspections necessary to get a phyto. So those are three sort of really relevant examples in the moment. Next slide, please. So a systems approach, in case anybody's wondering what the heck is that, it's really it's an effort to combine individual measures like an inspection or a treatment or a monitoring trapping system or whatever the individual measure is. You combine relevant individual measures into a system, and together they have a cumulative effect. So if you can't completely hit the goal of pest-free plants with one practice, by combining several different practices together, they have a cumulative effect and get you where you need to be. So in these systems, you have an effort to identify, again, what are the hazards, what can go wrong and where in the process, what are the critical control points where you as a grower can do something to mitigate the risk, and what are the best practices that will mitigate that risk. And then tied into these programs, you've got requirements for sort of the training, for determining who is accountable, for maintaining effective pest management programs, for record keeping, and so forth. And really the model here is what we see, what are often called hazard analysis critical control point programs that we see in the food system. Next slide, please. As you've heard Matt talk, he did some time on the he likes to call it the protein side. That's nice, sounds nicer than the dead animal side of agriculture. But basically, these kinds of programs are what exist in, for example, meat processing, to make sure that at the end of the day, a consumer who's consuming a hamburger at a Jack in the Box doesn't fall sick to E. coli. Maybe it's a little less dramatic on our side, but that's sort of the same basic principle that these programs are applying. Next, please. So with that, I wanted to introduce you to one of the emerging programs that we've got a growing number of greenhouse and nursery producers around the country kicking the tires of and participating in. Tom's one of them. So in a couple of moments, Tom will have observations to share on their own journey. But the program is called Systems Approach to Nursery Certification. It is a voluntary program. It's not mandatory. It's kind of an alternative to the traditional way that things have been done, with the inspector coming around and roaming around your operation looking for pest problems. under this program, growers who decide to get into it will develop and implement the necessary elements of a systems approach, and in doing so, they'll be able to ship their plants in the interstate marketplace. The program was developed over about a 10-year period, and in a two-phase pilot program, and there are now roughly 20 operations around the country, diverse in terms of what they're growing, diverse in terms of where they're growing it. And we've got greenhouse growers, nursery growers, folks in the north, folks in the south, who are already in the program and are shipping as SANC certified nurseries. And then we have several others that are sort of pending. I think one of them is very much a household name to you on this webinar. That's Altman Specialty Plants. They have a couple of facilities in Southern California that are going to be their first facilities in this program. Unfortunately, the process with Altman, because they are in what I'll affectionately refer to as the People's Republic of California, where you have county agriculture commissioners that are essentially like state agriculture commissioners, it's been a little bit of an extra challenging dance to get the county people in alignment with the state people and the whole deal. But we're about there, and it's high time that those operations are shipping as SANC certified operations. This whole program was developed in a three-way partnership, so it's not a traditional regulatory program in the sense that industry very much has a seat at the table. AmericanHort and our Horticultural Research Institute Foundation have been involved in negotiating the framework and in helping greenhouse and nursery operations to get on board. Next, please. Key elements for those who choose to get in the program: the cornerstone of your participation is a facility-specific risk assessment. And there's a process for going through this, which has been made quite a bit easier after the folks like Tom kind of pioneered it. I'll talk about that in a moment. But basically, the risk assessment looks at what are you doing and how are you doing it, and therefore, what are the hazards that are relevant to you. So it really looks at all aspects of plant production. Where do you source your young plants? How do you manage your growing media? What kind of growing media and how do you manage it? How do you manage water and water-related risks? How are the physical components of your business constructed, and do they do what needs to be done to prevent pests, et cetera? So the risk assessment basically guides then the development of a pest management plan. And ultimately, those things become elements of the facility manual, which is kind of your, this is the growing operation saying, here's what we're doing, here's how we're doing it, and this becomes what you are audited against by the state regulators, typically the state departments of agriculture. Participating operations periodically will conduct internal self-audits to make sure that everything is firing on all cylinders the way it's supposed to be. And then in lieu of the sort of standard inspections that have been done in the past, the role of the regulators really changes from running around your operation looking for bugs or signs of disease to oversight of the processes. Are you doing what you said you were going to do with respect to pest prevention? Next slide, please. The timeline for SANC, this varies depending on the operation. Tom, you'll be able to speak in a second how long it took you, but I think you were one of the faster operations, partly because you've already been involved in some quality management type programs, which follow similar principles. So I think for you it was a little bit quicker, but for most participants, the typical process of doing your self-administered risk assessment and then developing the other pieces and ultimately becoming SANC certified, you need to plan on it taking approximately a year. And of course, during the busy seasons, the work tends to get set aside. And then when it gets a little bit past peak season, things pick up in earnest. But usually about a year is what it takes. Next slide. This is a pivot. I'm going to call on make mention of our dear friend in the industry, Bob Dickman at Dickman Farms in New York. Bob Dickman Farms is a SANC certified operation, and as they were going through the process, they did pause a few times as they got into busy seasons, and and Bob kept raising the question. I'm anxious to find out if the juice is worth the squeeze. Operations that are choosing to do this, obviously it's purely a voluntary thing, and so folks are asking themselves, is it worth it? What are the benefits? And so, Tom, it would be helpful to hear from you a little bit about the journey you went on, and from your operations perspective, what have you seen in terms of the benefits to regulatory compliance from going into the SANC program?
Sure, Craig, thanks. Yeah, so why we got into it, I think Craig and I had this conversation probably 5 or 6 years ago, as he explained it to me, and we were intrigued, and we're in the second round of nurseries going through that. But one of our goals is always continuous improvement. How can we be better, and how can we really take a proactive approach to whatever we do to be on the front side of emerging insects or pests or diseases? How can we train our staff better? How can we treat our customers better? And all those things went into the decision-making process. So on the team building, or on the company side, and Craig mentioned the implementation curve was relatively easy for us. Is we really strive to build a team atmosphere here, getting people involved with all aspects of running the company. We're an open book managed company, so we share the numbers, but more importantly, we collaborate, we meet, we talk, we spend a lot of time in teaching. And how can we make our employees better? How can we use H2A as our primary workforce? But the H2A seasonal workers have a lot to offer. So how do we make those people part of the program? And this was another tool we could use to involve them. They're out touching the plants. If they see an abnormality, an insect or something, they bring it. We have a method for them to take pictures and show it to us. And we've got 500 scouters out there scouting plants instead of a couple people walking through the farm. It builds teamwork amongst the team, and then also teaching. On the nursery, the company side, we want to do the right thing for our customers. We don't want to ship disease or insect infested plants, and that was always when the nursery inspector did our inspection. It was a snapshot once a year. They really weren't seeing the entire issue during the course of the year, because we were on top of it, taking spraying and doing preventative measures during the year. So he came in. We welcomed them to find anything we might have missed, but it was sort of just a routine walk through the farm. And I used to kid with them, and they'd bring his friends out and walk through and look at the birds fly over. But it was good. We have a great relationship with ODA, and it's been good. So it's it just allowed us to be on the front side and be where we want to be.
How long did it take? Yeah, Tom, how long did it take you to go through the process? I mean, you did have the advantage of sort of the open book approach to management, and the fact that you've worked with your staff through some programs that maybe made it a little bit easier. But how long did it take you?
We had it was 3 to 6 months. It wasn't real long to get that up and running. And there again, we had a lot of the questions when we went through our first initial audit. We had a lot of the stuff already in place, like the communications, the teaching, the SANC, monthly SANC updates and so forth. It was easy for us to get up to speed. And we just look at it as normal business practices, things that in the original building the manual was things that they asked good questions, which took us to the next level to get better. So it wasn't difficult. I think SANC's one of those things that starts at the top. If management and the leadership team is in sync and in alignment, I wanted to do the right thing, it's not hard to get done, and you get everybody involved. And it's not one man's task. It's a team event to get things up and going. And you can do it easily in a year, but you can probably do it in 6 months.
That's helpful. I think, as we're talking about regulatory compliance and plant health and access to markets, I mean, it's sort of worth noting, I mentioned early on that at any given time, something new, some new plant pest or disease is getting introduced into the country and is threatening some aspect of our industry and market access. And, one of the most recent examples that we're struggling through, really doing deep knee bends right now to get through is more on the nursery side than the greenhouse side. But we never know what the next one's going to be. But to use that as an example, boxwood tree moth, it's a very, very serious insect pest, defoliating insect pest of boxwoods that's native again to Far East Asia, and managed to make its way to Western Europe, kind of wreaked havoc there, then made its way into somehow into Canada, the Toronto area, and then moved across into parts of adjacent states. It's now been found in limited areas in New York, Michigan, Ohio, and due to an apparent infested shipment from Canada, Massachusetts. And so the interesting thing from a risk management perspective, as that pest spreads, it is going to take a systems approach to address it. There isn't going to be a single silver bullet treatment or inspection process or something. So it's going to take a series of measures that build a system to be able to get plant material certified to move. And it's going to be much easier for an operation that has already implemented a program like SANC and already has the training and the record keeping, the whole mindset, all the processes are in place. It's going to be way easier to integrate the 3 new measures that you have to have as part of your plan to certify your plants for boxwood tree moth than it is for an operation that's never gotten into any of this. So we'll see an example soon enough, I'm sure, on the greenhouse side as we have in the past. Matt, if you could come to
comment on that a little bit, is so it's you can look at the the new regulations that we're going to have to deal with box tree moth as an obstacle, and it is we have to look at it as a diversion, but also an opportunity by having a program in place and willing to you're not going to fight City Hall and win the battle. If they say you can't ship, you can't ship. But by having these options out there with SANC and people like Craig working with the National Plant Board, we're seeing light on the ability to continue commerce and ship boxwood. And I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel to do that. But without SANC and some of these other things in place, they could shut the door. And I speak to our poor neighbors in Canada that had that door closed on them. It's been a severe economic impact on some businesses in Canada not to be able to ship boxwood to the United States. So it's a nice tool to have in your toolbox.
Yeah, excellent point. In just a couple of minutes, we're going to pivot to anyone who's got questions related to anything we've talked about, but also other issues that we really haven't talked about. We didn't try to because we just don't have the time today to do a deep dive, for example, into labor and what's changing with H2A. We've got a new greenhouse crop insurance program that's rolling out onto the marketplace specifically for regulated pests. There might be questions about that. Maybe there's something else on your mind that touches on regulatory compliance that we can either provide some guidance today, or if we don't have the answer today, we probably know somebody who does. But in the meantime, just in terms of the looking ahead on SANC, I think wanted to emphasize that there are a lot of different types of I will call them sustainability and certification programs in the marketplace. Many of them cost a good deal of money. They exist for a variety of purposes. SANC actually has, in the experience of the participants, it improves product quality, it enables regulatory compliance and certification, and reduces risk at the grower level. I think the big question going forward, and Tom, if you have a quick comment on this, please chime in, is will the supply chain see the value in those benefits? I think nobody wants, if they're at retail, nobody wants the garden center to be shut down, or have an area cordoned off, can't sell plants as Mother's Day weekend approaches. And the reliability of your suppliers, people who are choosing to implement programs like SANC, are reducing risk, and hopefully the supply chain will perceive those benefits going forward. Any thoughts on that, Tom?
It's just a matter of time and communications and telling people about the SANC program and what it stands for. It's but the value is there, and we just got to keep talking about it, and the consumers and the customers will start to see the advantage of a SANC run nursery.
Yeah, great. So one last slide. Let's just a quick comment on where to start, and then if folks have Brian and Julie, if you've got things you want to draw us out on, or if folks who are with us today have other questions or comments on any topic, these or others. The where to start, I wanted to mention that the risk assessment process for SANC has been made easier. And that's because there is now an online tool that simplifies the process. It's like a decision tree that walks you through, which of these things are you doing in your operation? If you're doing these things, then these are the things you've got to think about. And so it really simplifies the process. If you go to this website that's listed on the screen, and we probably can leave this slide up for a few minutes while we're moving on to other stuff. If you go to this website, you can request permission to be granted login credentials, and you can work on your own SANC risk assessment using this online tool. It just makes it a lot easier. Also, networking with peers. Talk to your state plant regulatory official, but if they come from a state that doesn't have a pilot nursery, they might be a little bit hesitant. And if this is something you want to pursue, let us know, because we're constantly talking to the National Plant Board, which is the umbrella organization for these state plant regulatory officials. And if you're in a state where your own official doesn't have really any experience, we can help provide them a backstop and get you started. And then finally, the National Plant Board maintains a SANC website that has a lot of information, both for regulators as well as for growers. I think that's it in terms of the deep dive on plant certification. So just want to turn it over to you guys, Brian and Julie, and if folks have any questions, we're happy to go there.
Thanks so much, guys. That was really a wonderful presentation with so much information that I think our attendees will find really helpful. I do have some follow-up questions. So just to stick with the certification topic that we've been on so far, how does the certification status for a particular operation change as new pests come out? So, for example, I've heard a lot about the Parvis Finus thrip. Does that call for additional certification or more inspections? How does that work for growers?
I'll take a stab, and then Tom, from a boots on the ground standpoint, you get the last word. I mean, when a new pest is found, there's a couple of things that we monitor and attempt to influence. And one is, does it become a quarantine pest or not? Does government regulate it? And sometimes that happens at the federal level. In the case of the boxwood tree moth I mentioned, that is a federally regulated pest currently. And it's a good news, bad news situation. If the feds do regulate, it creates the framework, and the states are actually preempted from demanding more than what the federal approach ends up being. So it gives us the advantage of consistency in the marketplace. If the feds quarantine or regulate for the pest, then whatever the feds require for certification becomes the rule. If the feds don't regulate for the pest, then it's a wide open opportunity for states who choose to do so to implement their own quarantines, and in the process, they tend to specify their own sort of, this is what you have to do. A lot of times we attempt, not always successfully, we attempt to sidestep having new quarantine regulations and to push for sort of alternative approaches. Since we mentioned boxwood earlier, I'll just, some years ago, a new disease called boxwood blight, a fungal pathogen, was introduced into the country. And we argued for sort of a more voluntary approach, where we worked with a group of scientists to build out, here are the best practices that need to be developed or need to be followed in plant production to reasonably be sure that you're not shipping boxwood blight along for the ride with your boxwood plants. And the National Plant Board developed a model compliance agreement so that individual states could use that model compliance agreement and sort of sign up operations in the state to do what they had to do. So that was not we avoided sort of the sometimes more draconian requirements of a quarantine by coming up with a voluntary alternative. Didn't work perfectly, but it worked pretty well. I think with these new emerging thrips like Thrips parvis spinus, it's a foot race on to make sure we have the tools in the toolkit to be able to detect, to control. Tom already mentioned the IR4 program and the importance of that program in getting pesticides cleared to be able to control pests. So with each one of these, we sort of look at what's at threat, who's moving to regulate, how do we influence them with an idea, with the goal of keeping the marketplace open for clean plants to move, but what are the tools that growers need to be able to live under that? And I guess the central point that we're making here is, if you're embracing a systems approach program already, like SANC, then you're probably a leg up and then some on being able to respond to the next new threat more rapidly than somebody who's just starting from scratch. Tom, what would
Yeah, I comment on that. So we use spotted lanternfly as an example. So when that came into Ohio, it was in the Youngstown area, eastern side of Ohio. We went right to our regulator and said, this is inevitable. It's coming across the state. How can we get a compliance agreement in place? So we started working on it a year in advance. So they started thinking about it. So when it got into Lake County, Cuyahoga County, Lorain County, we had they had the agreement done. Being SANC certified, it was just a matter of bada boom, bada bang. We were up and running. We never got interrupted with shipping or anything like that. But that could have been another hiccup that could have slowed down shipping to a lot of states if we weren't on the front side of that.
Funny you should mention spotted lanternfly.
Okay.
We just heard the other day that the Canadian inspectors intercepted a greenhouse plant shipment where a live spotted lanternfly had crawled up under the packing tape. Which apparently at this time of year they like to crawl into tight places.
Right.
Well, this one crawled up under the packing tape of a box of plants, and basically the Canadian Food Inspection Agency rejected the entire shipment. They never even opened a box. Yeah. The simple presence, and these were greenhouse plants. We don't think about spotted lanternfly so much as a greenhouse pest. It's kind of easily excludable from a greenhouse if you try. But here, as a practical matter, they're doubling down. They've told us they're going to double down on their inspections of greenhouse grown plant material from the United States for that pest. So people need to be vigilant. And this is a case. If you take a holistic approach to like a SANC type approach to plant regulatory compliance, then the fine women and men who are working on your packing line know what spotted lanternfly looks like. And they're not gonna let a spotted lanternfly find a nice place to rest underneath the packing tape. They're going to be watching for them in the space where the orders are being assembled and packaged.
Well, that's another question I had. You had mentioned that training and accountability is part of the systems approach. So where can growers look for that training? Does that come from some of the sponsoring associations like the National Plant Board and AmericanHort?
Do you have any?
Do the training in-house, as a matter of, spotted lanternfly, we work with the state on that, and they gave us, posters and DVRs and so forth to train with, but it's just what's the important animal or insect out there and how you want to attack it. And it's really explaining the why in a lot of cases with the people, why it's important, why we're looking for it, why do we have to control it and so forth. So it's, you put your own program together that fits your needs, and we do it probably more seasonally just because people forget. You can do a mass blast at one time during a year, but let's do it when it's relative to the insect in flight or so forth.
Yeah, and even a level up from what Tom's dealing with on the front lines with staff training. We try to be a partner, and obviously you all do too. And in fact, we often find ourselves working together with folks like Greenhouse Grower, including Greenhouse Grower, to on grower education. But if we start, if the subject of the day is Ralstonia, there's a lot that people ought to be thinking about in terms of where they're locating geraniums and how they're irrigating geraniums and whatnot, because if there is a regulatory scare around Ralstonia and a trace forward, how you've organized and how you're managing your production has huge implications for how the regulatory response unfolds and how much plant material ends up getting potentially implicated in snafu in the process. And those are things we train on, like through our plug and cutting conference and things that we do in partnership with you all and so forth.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think Brian had a couple questions to jump in with as well.
Yeah, and a couple of these are going to circle back to the very beginning of the conversation, talking about, advocacy as a whole for several of the issues that AmericanHort presented at Impact Washington. Tom, I'd like to ask you how you found your seat at the table. I don't know how that process works. Where, were you asked to join some of these committees, or were you proactive in saying, here, I'm part of an industry that has to have a voice recognized? What did you do to become a part of that process?
Well, it's sort of our business philosophy is taking a proactive approach. It really got important when we got in the H2A program back in the late 90s. Is we needed to make sure that people didn't understand the H2A program, and the government was sort of running the asylum. So we needed legislators to help us get our guys across the border. They had to call people up to sort of kick them in the butt. There was a lot of reasons to have your congressman on speed dial on your cell phone. It was so that's sort of how I got involved both at a state and national level, because we ran into roadblocks, and we just needed to be in front of those people that could make the decisions and make things happen for us. And they needed to know us and understand what our reasons, why is it important, why do you need these workers, and how impactful it is on a business when they're 2 weeks late showing up in the spring season. That's devastating.
It's kind of no way to run a railroad that you have to turn to your member of Congress because your application for labor certification for H2A is hung up at the Labor Department, but it happens all the time. And it happened a couple of years ago with a I live in Virginia. It happened with a Virginia grower, and I'm like, "Do you have a relationship with Congresswoman X?" And they're like, "Well, she's a Democrat." I'm like, "And do you have a relationship with, and because at the end of the day, that Congresswoman has a staff person who routinely is helping constituents navigate and troubleshoot. And so regardless of party affiliation, if the grower has taken the time to build a relationship and to educate the staff, and hopefully by extension, educate the member, then you got somebody to call. So it goes to everything that Matt and Tom covered up front about building relationships. Whether you need them today or not, you're going to need them someday.
But there's also, in addition to the self-serving part of it, is the education on the industry itself. We have a great thing to offer in what we do, and people don't understand the economic and the ecological impact that we have on the country. And they, a growing operation is definitely different than your neighborhood garden center. Not to derate them, but when you go to 1,000-acre nursery or 10 or 20-acre greenhouse, that's pretty impactful. They never seen it, and they're amazed by how it works.
We've probably got time for one more question. So I'll ask Craig and Matt, and I know I've talked with each of you about this before, but Matt, you were showing a slide about all of the new members of Congress that came in during this last election, the likelihood of several more in the next election cycle. Along with new members of Congress also comes new members of the industry, whether it's through a business passing from one generation to the next, or the next generation of leadership stepping up. Growers may go to school for horticulture or marketing or economics. I don't know, there don't seem to be too many classes on advocacy. So can you talk about how to develop the skills needed to go to your lawmakers on Capitol Hill or at the state level or even at the local level and have these types of conversations, and building that comfort level where you can immediately step in and say, these are the concerns that I have, and here's why my voice needs to be heard?
Yeah, appreciate it, Brian. We talked about in the past, and Craig can jump in here. Biggest thing is telling your story. I mean, when you get a chance and you see an elected official, state, federal, local, is what's your 30-second or 1-minute pitch about your business, about your greenhouse? You got to have that down. And then as you develop that, as we mentioned, you get to know the staff, you get to know the member. Go to events in the district. If it's at your Chamber of Commerce or your Knights of Columbus, or there's some type of town hall, go and do that. Be there. Get involved with AmericanHort, become a member, come out for the fly-in, go to your state legislature. If there's a fly-in there with your state nursery association or greenhouse association, get to know them, be there. And then the follow-up, it's the email, it's the call, it's what Tom has done with Max Miller, the congressman from Ohio. It's inviting him out to your facility. It's the follow-up email. It's talking with Karen Williams, his staffer, who I've known for years. And it's great when Karen's like, "Oh, I just met with Tom." And I was like, "Great. I have someone else who's telling the same story, but more importantly, they're from the state, they're from the district. They can tell you what's going on the ground." And then lastly, it's something that Craig and I talk about. It's agree or disagree, R or D, just be nice, follow up, be friendly. There's good and bad days. And as a former staffer, I will tell you, you had 10 to 15 issues, and they may not be thinking about what's going on with H2A or H2B or something with the Farm Bill because they're busy with another issue related to defense or healthcare. But if you call and take the time and are nice about it and pleasant and get your point across, and we will work with you as an AmericanHort member coming out with those one-pager and talking points. But getting that conversation, setting up the relationship. It's like any business, it's networking 101, information is power, and the constant follow-up. Craig, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and folks, we had some of this go on at the recent conference, and Matt did a bang up job, organizing and running that conference. But a good example would be the Midwest Ground Covers folks. They went out of their way to bring several, much, younger, newer, sort of less engaged at these levels, staffers along with them to expose them to what was going on. Now that conference only happens every other year. So what do you do in the meantime? But one beauty about our industry is that we are found almost everywhere. Not so much in Wyoming, but Wyoming aside, we're found just about everywhere in a significant way. And so, if somebody that was in Central or Western North Carolina said, "Hey, I want to learn more about advocacy and get involved," one of the first things we'd say is, "You've got some of the best leaders in the country right in your backyard. People like Bert Lemkes and Dennis Niemeyer, and we can connect you with the folks at Metrolina or whatever the case is." And so, if when the industry gets together sort of at the relatively local level and makes it a priority to have members of Congress or their staff come out, even for folks who have less experience, it kind of there's safety in a collaborative approach to doing that. But the most important thing is make it a business priority to spend some time on building these relationships, and you'll reap the return on investment.
Okay. Well,
and if I can add, just tell your story and be sincere. They want to know as much about you as you want to make an impression on them.
Sure, absolutely. Well, and I think on that note, since we're just past 3 o'clock, I think we can wrap up the conversation. I want to thank, on behalf of Julie, I want to thank Craig, Matt, and Tom, all of you for sharing your expertise and advice this afternoon. And thanks also to everyone who joined us today. We'll hope to see you again in December for the next installment of the Greenhouse Grower Executive Series. Please stay tuned to greenhousegrower.com for more information on the dates and topic for that. But again, Matt, Craig, Tom, thank you so much for your time today.
Glad to be on.
Thank you both. Thank everyone.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks all.
Thank you. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your week.